Sunrise in focus now, and Scientology is back in the spotlight. The controversial religion is getting ready to defend itself in a French court. It is accused of organised fraud.
It's the religion favoured by some of Hollywood's biggest stars. It's relatively new. Scientology was founded by science fiction author L. Ron Hubbard in the 1950s.
What does it do for you, in theory?
It increases one's knowingness. But if a man were totally aware of what was going on around him, he would find it relatively simple to handle any outnesses in that.
Even after 3 hours of talking, we never got an explanation from him that we could understand.
Now, my friend, it is
The Church of Scientology has long been accused of using its financial muscle to silence its harshest critics. But now, the church is to be tried for fraud. And 7 of its members have been accused of illegally prescribing drugs. If convicted, the church could be forced to shut its doors. The case stems from claims by a woman who said she was approached by Scientologists in a Paris street in 1998 and offered a free personality test. She says she ended up handing over more than $35,000 for courses, books, illegally prescribed drugs and an electrometer, which is supposed to measure fluctuations in her mental state. It's the latest clash between French officials and the religious group. They refuse to recognise Scientology as a religion, calling it a purely commercial operation. They even keep it under surveillance.
Well, what does this court case mean for the Church of Scientology? To find out, we're joined by international law expert Carolyn Evans. Carolyn, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Now, does the church have a case to answer here?
Well, it's very early days in this case yet. We'll have to wait and see what the evidence says and what sort of defence the church puts up. There have been a lot of these cases in the past and many of them have been unsuccessful. But at least when it comes to prescribing drugs and not being a pharmacy, that's a pretty serious charge. If it can be shown on the evidence, then the church certainly has a problem in that regard. A little bit more complicated when it comes to issues like lessons and books and e-meters and so forth. That raises some really difficult issues of religious freedom versus things like fraud, because most churches and most religions say, you know, if you say these prayers or read this scripture or go on this pilgrimage or drink these holy waters, it will have some benefit of mind, body and spirit. And so the court's going to have to weigh out very carefully allowing people to adopt religious beliefs, even if later on they feel foolish or mistaken for having done so, and also saying, well, just because you call yourself a religion doesn't mean you can get away with making any sort of claims or engaging in fraudulent behaviour.
How big, Carolyn, could this problem be for the church? Could it be forced to close its doors in France?
That claim's been made. As I say, there have been quite a few of these cases brought against the church, and it's certainly still standing. I think even if the prosecution was successful, you'd see appeals right through the French legal system, and then you'd almost certainly see an appeal to the European Court of Human Rights. And while the French government has been quite hostile to the Church of Scientology, the European Parliament and the European Court of Human Rights tend to treat Scientology more as a religion and be a bit more sympathetic. So I think we're a very long way before that sort of question arises. Even if they were successful, I think at most the church would be required to cut back its activities. It would be very hard to close the church down and still comply with the European Convention on Human Rights.
Carolyn, why is there that hostility in France in particular?
Look, it's an interesting question. Obviously, the French government has a complex relationship with a lot of religions, particularly minority religions. And some of your viewers might remember the controversies over, for example, girls wearing headscarves in French schools. But the French government has been suspicious of what they call cults or sects for quite some time. And for the last 12 years, they've had a parliamentary monitoring group that lists over 170 what they consider to be suspicious or dangerous cults. The French government argue that these groups are intimidating, are fraudulent, target vulnerable people, and prevent those people from speaking out. The Church of Scientology, of course, claims that this is just discrimination and bigotry, that they're being unfairly targeted on the basis of very little evidence, mostly from disgruntled former members.
All right, well, the case goes on. We'll keep our eye on it. We thank you for your time this morning, Carolyn.
Thank you.